Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Beyond the Rankings, brought to you by 32 Beat Writers. TJ Wengert here with you, as alongside our lead fantasy draft analyst, Zareh Kantzabedian, also known as Z. And Z, man, this is exciting, one, because first time I'm on the fantasy show, so this is exciting for me to kind of tap into a new world. And it's the first time you and I have gotten to do a show together. So welcome to 32 Beat Writers, man. I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I think I'm really excited to get the second show going, and I'm really happy to be sitting here with you. I know you're the lead college football analyst. You're a wealth of knowledge. I wish I had the time to go into the next year's class. I just don't have the time, and that's why I'm so glad to be talking to you. And I think what we do together works well, because I'm looking to learn from you and hoping to learn from them, and everybody can learn from all of us. So yeah, ready to get the show started, and we got training camps coming up. And we're just going to do a small team preview right now with offensive head coaches and what those teams might look like going into the 2025 season. Maybe some oversights by the fantasy community. So definitely looking forward to getting started on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit on it. My 2026 quarterback rankings, they are out live. So if you're itching for next year's quarterback class, definitely check that out. Next week, we'll have running backs. But to your point, Z, like so much of what you bring to the table, what I bring to the table, Matt, Zach, everyone really at 32, brings this great holistic football view. So if you're looking for great football insight, especially if you want to know everything that's going on in training camp, I highly encourage you to follow us on X, subscribe to us here on YouTube, and join and become a subscriber on our website too. I'm telling you, it is great money spent. Then you get access to our Discord. You get to ask Z any question you want. You get to talk to me, Matt, Zach, so on and so forth, plus all of our other subscribers. So I want to plug the new website. It is awesome. So highly encourage everyone to sign up and subscribe to 32 Beat Writers. Alrighty, Z, man, the three teams we're talking about today with these new head coaches, new play callers, I think Dallas is the great one to start with. It's the best one to me to lead off with, because it's the only one where we've seen this guy really recently with this team, working with a lot of the same personnel. So let's dive into the Dallas Cowboys. New head coach, Brian Schottenheimer. He was the offensive coordinator back in 2023. Z, where do you want to dive into this one? Do you want to start with the passing attack, or do you want to talk a little bit of run game, especially with some of the news we got yesterday about this Cowboys backfield?
We'll just go. I think we should just start with basically like what Brian Schottenheimer is planning to do with the offense. Just really briefly, I think he wants to essentially, he's already spoken about keeping Mike McCarthy's structure basically in contact. Schottenheimer is a guy who goes from town to town and brings his structure and just kind of installs it wherever he goes. And he's a very heavy play action kind of coach. So we're going to use what Dak Prescott did in 2023 with Schottenheimer as OC, who he was the OC in 2024 and 2023. And Dak Prescott finished as a QB3 in fantasy that year and was in conversation for the MVP race as a quarterback. So we're going to use that as the sample size, because last year Dak Prescott obviously played like about maybe a quarter or half the year under Schottenheimer. So I'm expecting a lot of pass volume. We'll just talk about pass volume to start things off. I'm expecting a lot of pass volume in 2025. In 2023, the Cowboys were fourth in pass rate over expectation, which is basically a measure of how aggressive you are versus the norm of pass rates versus the league, right? So like we'll give an example of how aggressive they were, right? So when the Cowboys were leading, they were fifth in pass rate over expectation and second in passing yards. And interesting fact, 51% of their total passing yards was accumulated from when they were in the lead of football games. I mean, that's very aggressive of thinking about a team. You know, usually you go into like more of a run script with your offensive game plan when you're in the lead, but the Cowboys were still throwing it very heavily. And I think you have to think about like this run game this year. It's not very strong. They don't have any really notable running backs to speak of, and we can get into the run game a little bit later. But I mean, think about like Dallas had Tony Pollard in 2023. You know, and they were still chucking it all over the place. And, you know, Tony Pollard is a converted wider. But, you know, you got to think about who they have this year and think about the pass volume and how that's gonna translate to a heavy pass volume philosophy this year. I think this is really good for the weapons that they have for George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's still going to be, you know, he's going to have like a probably 30% ceiling target share, which is elite wide receiver one. But I think a lot of people might be sleeping a little bit on Pickens. You know, I know he has his attitude, behavioral concerns, how he was acting. You know, he was kind of showed like lazy play, lazy blocking, what have you in Pittsburgh. I mean, you're a Pittsburgh fan, right, TJ? Aren't you a Steelers fan?
Yep. Yes, I am. Yeah, and I mean George is, he's definitely a
so
unique
how do you feel about Pickens?
Yeah, I mean he's a unique personality, and I mean unfortunately it seems to be a personality the Steelers gravitate towards. But I think highlighting him with Schottenheimer coming into town is really interesting when you look at what Michael Gallup, what I think they thought he would be in 2023 and the style of player he is. I think George Pickens is Michael Gallup plus, he's just that similar type of build, contested catches, going to go up and win it, 50-50 balls, work the sideline. Pickens just does all that better than Michael Gallup. So I think you're right on the money here. Great scheme fit, awesome compliment to CeeDee Lamb. It's just going to come down to that headspace. But, we've also seen a lot of guys that last year of their rookie deal, they lock in, they get zeroed in, and they have a career year. And that wouldn't shock me in the slightest if that was George Pickens this year.
I think Pickens could have a year similar. Like when you look at these teams that are really, really heavy in pass rate, like you look at the Bengals, T. Higgins finished with like 110 targets and he finished as a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy. You look at these teams that throw a lot, especially in the red zone. I think Pickens, his ceiling is kind of like a T. Higgins finish. I'm saying that's a possible scenario with the offensive environment and the context of what we have. It's also important to remember that Schottenheimer, he's already talking about running a faster tempo on offense. And I've already mentioned earlier that he likes to run a lot of play action. And on play action is where a lot of those deep shots typically come from. If you look at play action versus just regular drop back, play action always has a higher yards per attempt than just regular drop back. So Schottenheimer was Seattle's OC from 2018 to 2020, right? And Russell Wilson, he ranked in play action passing yards from 2018 to 2020. He ranked 7th, 4th, and 13th, right? So I think we could see, Dak Prescott lead the league or be, close to top 5 in play action passing yards. George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert, they should all be there to receive all those deep passing yards. So I think, considering the running game, Schottenheimer's play action philosophy, I think, Dak Prescott, he's being drafted as outside of the top 12 at quarterback. These are great guys to, jump on. There's a lot of good value at quarterback. Another one we'll get into later again. And real quickly, we'll just go into the run game. Schottenheimer, he's typically like to run a lot of zone, right? And that's how he was during his first 3 years at Seattle, a lot of zone. So they brought in Clayton Adams, who was Arizona's offensive line guard. So Clayton Adams is now Dallas's OC. So Adams Arizona ran gap at the highest rate last year at 69% in the entire league, right? Cowboys ran zone. The Cowboys ran zone under 69% of the time in 2024. They were like one of the least gap heavy teams in the league. They got in Phil Mafah in the 7th round of this year's draft. And again, somebody you can talk about, somebody you probably watched a lot at Clemson. Phil Mafah was a very, very good gap runner. I mean, he is 6'1", 234 pounds, not a fast guy, 4.6 140 time. He's huge, average speed score, whatever. But if you look at Mafah and Connor, right, check this out. So here's the comp between Mafah and James Conner, where Clayton Adams just came from in Arizona. Mafah 6'1", Connor 6'1", Mafah 234, Connor 233, Mafah 4.6 140 time, Connor 4.65 40 time, and Mafah had a 103.6 speed score. Connor had a 99.7 speed score. So the comps are near 1-to-1 of what they did with Connor and gap, and they did a lot of like counter. They did a lot of buck sweep. They did a lot of classic gap run plays, and this is where Mafah shines as a runner because he's a very patient runner. He's already mentioned at the NFL Combine how he loves to run counter, how he loves to run gap schemes. Javonte Williams last year was one of the most inefficient backs in the league last year. He averaged 3.7 yards per carry. His rush success rate was terrible. He was at 33%. The only person with a worse rate was Tyrone Tracy. So I mean, and it's pretty bad. I mean, he had 191 touches last year. Williams did, and he accumulated 859 total yards. The last RB to have the same number of touches in a Sean Payton offense was 29-year-old Mark Ingram in 2019, and he had 44 fewer scrimmage yards on 32 fewer touches, right? So like Williams squandered an amazing opportunity in Denver last year. And I just, I could see him. I could see the backfield playing out like this. Like Javonte Williams probably start the year as a lead back, right? Just because veteran deference, very good in pass protection, one of the best pass pro running backs in the league last year. But after that, the season's going to go on. And if Clayton Adams says, look, we're going to go with this strong gap scheme, draft the Phil Maffa, really strong gap runner, very similar to James Conner. I could see Phil Maffa taking over this backfield. And I know people are high on Jaden Blue, right? But Jaden Blue's like, he's never had more than 200. I think he's had like 150 career rushing attempts, a single season high. He's not a bell cow running back. And I see the fantasy community getting very high about Jaden Blue, and understandably so. But you have to understand, this isn't going to be a high volume running back. He's great to get excited about in the sense that he's a great value pick in rookie drafts. But outside of that, like, he's kind of like a James White-esque running back. And then we just had a report come out about Jaden Blue yesterday. I forgot who. Marcus Mosher reported on it from a. Marcus Mosher was reporting on what a coach said, the comments of Coach Glenn Smith, who said some not so great news about Jaden Blue yesterday or 2 days ago. Glenn Smith said that the coaches with the Cowboys have expressed that Blue is borderline lazy and that the team is not thrilled with his work habits. This isn't a great fit for a fifth-round pick who is not only trying to earn a role in offense, but also make the roster. So, and he said a little bit more, but I mean, the gist of it is that he doesn't have a great work ethic right now. And, we still have training camp to go to. And real quick, I will add that I will be at Cowboys training camp 1 to 2 times a week starting next week when they report. They're 10 minutes down the street from my house. So that is essentially my take on the Cowboys offense. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to it, but yeah, that's how I'm seeing that play out.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about Phil Maffa and how that signals this team's probably going to head in a little bit more of a gap scheme direction. I would argue the first-round pick, Tyler Booker, is even more of a declaration. We're moving in this direction. We are going to run more gap. We're going to be more physical, especially inside the red zone. Because Booker, he wasn't my top interior offensive lineman, but I understood where people were coming from. Take this guy in the first round. But then when you see him in mocks going to Seattle with Clint Kubiak taking over COC, Miami, those were fits where I was I'm not seeing it. He's not that great on the move. But Dallas, Schottenheimer, Phil Maffa, all this kind of signals, hey, this team's going to try to just move guys to the line of scrimmage, maybe simplify the run game a little bit. And I also think the Rams were a big catalyst for this. A couple of years ago, they switched to gap, and all of a sudden, red zone efficiency starts to rise. So I think we're starting to see that trickle throughout the rest of the league. And go on the Cowboys for jumping in on this. And then real quick, I wanted to add on Jaden Blue. Yeah, Blue's a really fun player. Wasn't the highest on him from a draft perspective. But I understand where some people fantasy-wise are excited. He's really fast, and he's a really good pass catcher. So, naturally, you're like, okay, hold on. We might have something here. But to me, the fumbles, he's got inconsistent vision, and really the main thing he brings is really nice hands out of the backfield. So I think James White really is a good comparison. I don't think anybody was looking to give James White 20 touches a game, but matched up against a linebacker, take it from a Steelers fan, like we talked about. I saw that man matched up on too many linebackers during the peak Brady years. So they can take advantage of that. But you also don't love to hear the work ethic stuff. So that is tough, especially when you're a day 3 rookie. Nothing is guaranteed. 5th round, sure, maybe it's a little bit more than a 7th rounder, but you still got to go in there and you got to earn your stripes. So that's a little frustrating to hear. But to me, I always kind of figured him more as, pass catching screen specialist, because he's also not a great pass protector in my eyes. So he is very much a specialist within that realm. I wish Javonte Williams could have avoided that ACL injury right out of college, because he could have been something special, but I'm with you there too. Javonte's he's just not the same guy. So man, I could totally see a world. Javonte early on, it wouldn't shock me if Phil Maffa does end up becoming that guy, especially with his similarities to Connor. I think you're spot on to highlight that.
Right on, man. Yeah. I think there's a lot of hype around the backfield right now, and Javonte Williams right now, his ADP is very suppressed. So he's not like it's going very high. Jaden Blue, all those guys, Phil Maffa, all those guys are going really late. So you just take your dart throws at him. If they work out, the opportunity cost is very minimal. You're not going to be at risk at all for drafting any of those guys. I think the real value in the Cowboys, just to sum it up real quick, the real value in the Cowboys offense this year is with Dak Prescott and George Pickens being where he's at. And obviously CeeDee Lamb's a first round pick. So there's not like you're not going to save anything over there. So
yeah, all this reaching at straws for these running backs, all this to say, buy into this passing attack because they're going to lean into it really, really heavy, just like they did in 23, honestly. All right, Z, we ready to leave the Cowboys? Want to talk Liam Coen of the Jag now?
Absolutely. Let's do it. All right. So Liam Coen and the Jags. All right. We'll get into what the Bucks were under Liam Coen. Okay. So the Bucks under Liam Coen, this is their personnel. This is what their identity was. So they were in 11-man. They were in 11-man personnel 71% of the time. That was the 8th highest. And they were good out of it too. That was the 8th highest in the league. So if for anybody that doesn't know, 11-man personnel means 1 running back, 1 tight end, and you're basically having 3 receivers on the field, right? So you're having more there. I mean, that essentially means you want to throw the ball more, basically. So they ranked 6th in expected points added out of 11-man personnel. That should be the staple formation in Jacksonville when you consider what Jacksonville has on offense, right? Brenton Strange being the starting tight end. I'm not sure if I don't think they have a second tight end who can be a viable blocker out of 12 right now. So I think when they go Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr., Parker Washington or De'Ami Brown in the slot, whoever you like. Yeah, Parker Washington probably, right? I like Parker Washington a lot. So that would probably be the formation that you see a lot in Jacksonville this year. In 2024, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 4th in the league at targeting their running backs. They were behind the Dolphins, Steelers, and Saints, who were the only 3 teams that targeted the running back position more. So it's essential to remember that good coaches adapt their personnel to the offense. That being said, all of Jacksonville's running backs have adequate receiving profiles. Coming out of college, Travis Etienne entered the league with a yards per route run score of 2.5. LaQuint Allen, who was also kind of, getting a little bit of hype. He was at 1.07 and Bashal Tuna was at 0.98. A little bit lower on Allen and Tootin, but still adequate enough. The film, and it's also important to remember that running backs and their receiving work mostly to sometimes is tied to scheme fit to coaches. And running backs aren't being asked to run whip routes. They're not being asked to run, dagger concepts. We're running, Texas routes out of the backfield. We're running swing routes, screens. These aren't advanced. Just you got to have just relatively good hands. So jumping the gun and saying, "Oh, this guy isn't a good receiving back." Well, that's up for debate because again, the context of what a running back does as a receiver isn't there isn't a lot of depth required in that area of the game, right? So we'll just get into the running backs right now and where they're going and the value they can provide. First of all, we'll start with Travis Etienne. Right now, his ADP is RB33 in consensus drafts, right? So everybody keeps asking who this year's Bucky Irving is. I think we should also be asking who this year's Rachaad White is. And if you think about it, Rachaad White finished with over 1,000 receiving scrimmage yards, 1,000 scrimmage yards in 2024. Finishes at RB2. And if you think about Travis Etienne and Rachaad White, it's essentially the same thing. 2 kind of inefficient running backs who they're somewhat inefficient running the ball. Better pass catchers, if anything else, right? So I mean, Etienne should finish the year with I think he should finish the year with about 170 rushing attempts and 55 to 60 targets, 65 targets in that range, and finish it as an RB2. But the guy I really like this year a lot that people aren't talking about is Tank Bigsby. He's RB46, going more than 10 picks later than Tank Bigsby. Travis Etienne, sorry. Tank Bigsby, he had great rushing metrics in 2024, and I think he's going to be the primary early down back in Jacksonville this year. Among 2024 backs with at least 150 carries, Bigsby in missed tackles forced per attempt, which is basically elusiveness or how often you force a defender to miss their tackles. Bigsby was 4th overall at a rate of 27%. Bucky Irving was 3rd at 28%. So, I mean, there's kind of he was already in that same realm as Bucky Irving. The yards after contact per attempt, Bigsby was 2nd in the league with 3.7 yards after attempt per attempt. breakaway run rate, Bigsby was 8th. So, I mean, Bigsby had solid rushing metrics in 2024. He profiles, I think, as the early down back in 2025. I strongly believe that. And I think is an immense value as somebody who could finish as an RB2. Baykal Tuten, right now going as RB44, already has some, I don't know, negative hype coming out of camp, had fumble issues going from college. I'm not of the belief that fumbles really carry over from college to the NFL. I think it's a fixable trait. It's just, hand positioning, where you got your fingers on the ball. It's not really something I worry about, but it is concerning that he already did fumble. I think it was his first carry in OTAs. So I think he's not going to be a huge part of the offense to open, and people are going to be banging their fists on the table, calling for Baykal Tuten, fantasy managers mostly. But I think with Tuten, the thing is his athleticism, right? It's elite, and it should not be overlooked. I think the juice is worth the squeeze. I mean, it's really difficult to grab one of these late round running backs and stick them on your bench and then just keep them there and not cut them for the entire year because you have entire needs. But Baykal Tuten, he had his 10-yard split, which is a measure of acceleration. It measures the first 10 yards in your 40 time, right? His 10-yard split was of 1.49. When you think about his size, 1.49 is high-end acceleration. He had 100th percentile 40 time. He had a 98th percentile speed score, a 97th percentile burst score. I mean, the athleticism is insane, dude. Is insane. And I think you need to stick this guy on your bench and just let Coen kind of figure it out, right? And we'll see what happens. I mean, if ETN isn't traded and Tuten forces himself into this backfield, it's going to be an ugly three-way committee, and there is still time in the offseason for one of these guys to be traded. We'll see what happens. Running back can get injured on another team. So there's still time for this play out. But, I mean, as far as drafting any running back from this offense, I think I prefer Bigsby mostly as the early down back, and he'll probably get some receiving work as well. If we're talking about if we jump over the passing game, Trevor Lawrence, right? Okay, this is possible ceiling scenario, right? So we'll use Baker Mayfield's 2024 season as the archetype of what Trevor Lawrence can achieve this year. Baker Mayfield, his Bucs 2024 accolades, he was 3rd in passing yards, 2nd in completion percentage, 2nd in passing touchdowns, right? If you think about the weapons that Mayfield has and the weapons that Trevor Lawrence has, they're not too far off from each other, right? You got BTJ, you got Mike Evans, you got Travis Hunter, and then you got Parker Washington, who's a solid slot. Brenton Strange, I actually like better than Kadon, even though Kadon was great. Kadon had a really good college production profile. So the weapons are relatively the same, right? Baker Mayfield under Liam Coen had a career year and finished as QB3 in points per game. He was drafted as the QB21 in drafts last summer. Trevor Lawrence is currently being drafted as the QB20, right? So if I could drop this mic, I would, but I can't detach it right now. But the thing is, so we're doing the same thing with Trevor Lawrence this year that we did with Baker Mayfield last year. And the only thing concerning is that Trevor Lawrence doesn't make too many great reads under pressure, and what quarterback really does. But when you look at, like, if you go to PFF and you look at their stats for, completion percentage under pressure, Trevor Lawrence had one of the lowest rates. His offensive line, not too great this year, but, at ADP at cost, I think he has a good shot to outproduce at ADP with Liam Coen. The added weapons on offense, feeling pretty good about Trevor Lawrence and the Jags this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll start with that last point that you brought up against pressure. I think that's always sometimes something I think that we put a lot of eggs in the basket of the quarterback, but I also think the OC is a big part of that, right? Like sometimes the bullets start flying and you just have to have instinctual answers. And that's part of why, and we're going to talk about the Bears in a little bit, like looking at Ben Johnson leaving Detroit, Jared Goff's been really good against Brian Flores and that pressure scheme. And I'm interested to see this year how much of that is Goff, how much of that was Ben Johnson. So I'm really interested to see the same thing here in Jacksonville. Does Liam Coen have a few more layups, a few more easy answers there for Trevor Lawrence? And then you talk about the volume that Baker Mayfield had last year. I'd be surprised if it's not a similar volume for Trevor Lawrence. And at the end of the day, fantasy football is a game of volume, right? We want attempts. We want as much workload on someone's plate as possible. And I think, I mean, we didn't even mention De'Ami Brown. This is a team that's 4 receivers deep, a tight end with Brenton Strange, who I also really like, and a number of backs that LaQuint Allen's a solid pass catcher. And I think that's just kind of where he is right now. I wouldn't expect anything more than that. ETN, I'm with you. I think there's a team out there that also saw him as a first rounder, and the current staff in Jacksonville, they didn't take him in the first round. So I could totally see a world where ETN's on the move, and this becomes a Bigsby and Bashal Tootin, but they're not going to do that until they're fully comfortable with Tootin. So some of that is kind of, let's wait and see once we get into full training camp. How does Tootin look? The fumbles are definitely concerning at his time at Virginia Tech. I think it was 9 over the last 2 years. That's a little alarming. Jaden Blue, kind of a similar number. But the bigger thing for me with Tootin is freaky athlete. And like the home run plays make you go, holy cow, this guy's a future star. But the vision could definitely be inconsistent. So I'm interested to see, and I think Coen probably going to be a lot of zone. He's such a good athlete, Tootin is, that if they can just have, I think they've done a good enough work on that offensive line where it should be an improvement from last year. If he can just trust his vision a little bit more, because that's the other thing with Virginia Tech. Not the best program. It's kind of taken a step back. The offensive line was meh. Quarterback play is kind of meh. So I felt like last year, some of the vision inconsistency, it's shades of Amari and Hampton where it's like, I have to do all this and I have to hit a home run here and the offensive line's not going to do it for me. So I do wonder if he feels more confident in his blocking scheme in front of him. And, if that maybe unlocks a little bit more of that vision, because normally vision is not something that you get better at. Either you can see it or you don't. It's just typically a feel thing. But I do wonder at the next level with a little bit less on his plate, just playing within the offense, reading out blocks. And then when you think about one cut, he sees the seam back up the middle. He's going to cut back up for low 4.3 speed. You talked about 98th percentile burst, like insane athlete. So there's a lot of upside there, but it just comes down to, and some of it's just, I want to see it. I just got to see it before I can fully buy into it. But how does the vision look in the terms of his offense? And then can he clean up some of these fumbles? But if they're confident with Tootin, I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever if ETN's on the move to a team that also saw him as like a late first round type of guy, because they might still be in that position where they felt that way back in 2021. This regime is not the same one that took him in the first round. So I'm really interested in that. And it's kind of amazing to me. I'm with you on Bigsby. I could totally see a world where he's maybe the best fantasy guy out of this backfield, depending on, again, Tootin and those kind of question marks I have. And Tootin's got a higher ADP than Bigsby right now. So that's kind of surprising in and of itself. And we saw Bigsby have some big games last year. So, even from that standpoint, a little bit more of a proven commodity versus a rookie where, it could be a crapshoot. So, no, I'm with you. I echo a lot of those same thoughts.
Yeah, Bigsby got the ball rolling early in the offseason, and he started to take away touches from ETN pretty early in the season. But I mean, injuries played out. It was just a funky year in Jacksonville. Nobody can get any momentum as far as the run game went. Yeah, but Tootin, we talk about athleticism a lot, but I mean the position is it requires at the most fundamental, like philosophical, intangible level. The position requires high processing. That's the same thing at quarterback position, right? I mean, the running back position might require the same amount of processing at quarterback. Now, when running zone, actually, zone requires a lot more processing because you have to pick. You're gonna bend, you're gonna bang, you're gonna bounce. What are you doing with the ball? And Tootin needs to kind of have a good decision-making process and figure out what to do in that sense. So yeah, there's a lot of value in this offense.
Yeah.
What's that?
Just tempoing your runs, right? Like if your guys aren't getting out in front, you can't just full steam ahead, run out in front of them because then it's a 3-yard loss, and now it's 2nd and 13. Congratulations. So also some guys tend to be one-speed runners. I'm really interested to see what Tootin looks like from that standpoint. Can he kind of vary in tempo his runs too? Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Absolutely. No. Yeah, absolutely. He's a name to watch. Yeah. The final team for this week, and we'll just roll on to the final team of this podcast. The final team is the Chicago Bears. Everybody's been loving talking about Ben Johnson and the magic and the wonders that he brings. He's a magician, offensive guru, right? Well, the thing about Ben Johnson is that he doesn't run one system, right? So good luck trying to figure out exactly what he's going to do in Chicago, but that's what makes him such a good coach, right? This is what we always talk about. This is what people always talk about with good coaches. You take your knowledge about football, you look at what you have, and you kind of try to acquire versatile pieces in offense, right? Which is why I think he drafted Luther Burden the 2nd round this year, because Luther Burden, I think, was a highly versatile wide receiver. But Ben Johnson, as far as what he's going to do on offense, good luck trying to figure that out. If you look at what he's done in the past, if you look at 2024, And for example, if you look at what he did with zone and gap in 2024, like one year he ran more zone, then the next year he ran more gap. And he did that with Jahmyr Gibbs because Jahmyr Gibbs is good in both schemes, right? So if we're gonna talk about the Bears, I think, you know, the Bears and everybody in the commentary, if you go to like fantasy Twitter, what have you, the question is always, who's going to be this year's Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery? Well, I say it's going to be nobody, because that was Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. This is DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson and Kyle Monangai, right? And those two, you're talking about Jahmyr Gibbs, who's one of the best processing running backs I've ever seen in my life, right? That guy had some insane, beautiful tape. This guy was one of the most elusive backs. It's not because of just his ability, but because of his processing speed and his ability, that coupled with his athleticism, right? So we don't have that in Chicago. But I mean, we do have guys in, you know, DeAndre Swift has been, you know, capable at Philadelphia. He had a career year running inside zone. He ran for, I think it was his first year, he ran for over 1,000 yards. I just should have looked that up. But anyways, we'll just get into DeAndre Swift real quick. Right now, RB24. He's being drafted in a bit of a dead zone. Kind of would rather have other guys like TJ Hawkinson, Calvin Ridley, maybe Aaron Jones, but there is upside there for him to finish as a top 12 running back of the position. If it really depends on what they're going to do. I think if, you know, Ben Johnson looks at what DeAndre Swift did and in Philly, he's like, all right, man, he's like, you ran a lot of inside zone at Philly. We're just going to keep you running inside zone here at in Chicago this year, running some, you know, some mid to inside zone type concepts that could be your bread and butter. Hopefully DeAndre Swift turns out to be the bell cow. I think there has been already discussion about what one beat reporter, what was his name? God, let me find it. I can't. Usaid Koshul, I think is his name. He said entering camp, the Bears will give every opportunity to Kyle Monangai to take possible carries away from Swift and Johnson. So right now it seems like Swift and Johnson are the two top running backs, but it feels like this backfield is more fluid and not set in stone, really, because, I mean, if we're talking about Kyle Monangai and, you know, what Ben Johnson's already talking about him taking carries away from DeAndre Swift, you know, it doesn't really feel like, you know, we know DeAndre Swift's track record with Ben Johnson, how he wasn't a big fan of, how Johnson wasn't a big fan of Swift in Detroit. And, you know, he's already like, let's just get Kyle Monangai. It's hopefully he takes the carries. It sounds like he almost wants carries taken away from DeAndre Swift at this point. I like Kyle Monangai a lot. He's at 5'8", 211 pounds, right? 32.1 BMI. One of the heaviest running backs in this class. Him and Cam Scatterbo measured in as one of the biggest backs in this running class. I think he's got every opportunity to beat out Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. He had the 6th highest 10-yard split among this year's rookie running back class, again, which is acceleration, right? He doesn't have high 40 time. He's a big guy, right? Big guys don't run fast in a straight line. But acceleration, again, is really good. Processing is really good. Ran a lot of zone in college, but he does also have the capabilities on film, if you look at what he does well, to run gap plays as well. So I think he's a lot more versatile than people expect, which is why I think Ben Johnson, again, who likes versatile players, selected Kyle Monangai. I think he seems like Kyle Monangai seems like the best of both running backs curling on the roster in Roschon Johnson, who's like the bigger, you know, man gap concept runner, downhill runner, and DeAndre Swift, who probably has a little bit more agility than Roschon Johnson. I think Monangai is the best of both those guys. So Kyle Monangai right now, RB68 in drafts, essentially free, and not somebody that you're going to be drafting and sticking on your bench probably, but somebody who's probably going to be who has the chance of surfacing later on in the season as his name becomes, you know, as you know, if DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson begins to falter. So we'll see what happens with that. But I do like Kyle Monangai a lot as a versatile back. I think there is a future for him in Chicago. He had fantastic production in college. Roschon Johnson already being talked about. His ADP is RB56. So right now in cost, Swift is the most expensive. Roschon Johnson, second most expensive at ADP at RB56, and Kyle Monangai is at RB68. So the disparity between the cost between Johnson and Monangai, not too different, but I'd put my chips on Monangai, and hopefully Monangai has a good training camp and builds good momentum going to the season. Johnson, yeah, again, could be the favorite for man gap concepts, which is basically like, downhill running concepts. You have pulling guards, you have hat on hat, a lot of duo. He's okay as a running back. He shows some elusiveness. Really hard to project much upside for Roschon Johnson in this offense, but I could be wrong. Right now, I do project him as the primary goal line back. And outside of that, there isn't, it's really kind of convoluted right now, but I would take a shot on DeAndre Swift where he's going, and I would definitely take a shot on Kyle Monangai, especially in rookie drafts and dynasty formats. And there are other pieces of this offense, if you want to talk about, Burden and what Colson Loveland can be as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just interesting going through all three of the teams we talked about today. I almost just find myself gravitating towards the guys with lower ADPs. And if it's uncertain, shoot, I'll just take the shot in the dark. And I'll take the guy who's last man standing. And some of that's also, you did a great job laying out what Phil Moffitt could be, what Tank Bigsby could be for the Jags. And here, man, like Kyle Monangai, yeah, I mean, day 3 pick. I understand there's not a whole lot that's being forced onto him and saying, hey, this is his offense. But DeAndre Swift, the vision can be a little inconsistent. I do think he's the best pass catcher of that group. Roschon Johnson, I definitely think you're on the money there. If they're going to run gap stuff, it's probably going to be with Roschon. But the goal line, I think, is going to be really interesting because, Monangai for Rutgers, like that's where I felt like he really shined. And, Connor Rogers of, NBC Sports on the NFL Stock Exchange pod, I remember listening to this, and I got a great laugh out of this, described him as like a 2003 Honda Civic. You know what you're getting. What you see is what you get, and it just keeps on trucking forward. And I mean, you said it, 5'8", 211, and good acceleration. I mean, you got to buckle up the chin strap every time you're going head-to-head with Monangai because he wants to run through you, and it's your job to slow him down. So I do wonder ultimately where that goal line, kind of split does play out. I do think he has good vision too. So short yardage, that comes in handy too. So very interested in that. I'll probably, especially in my dynasty league, I'll try to get my hands on Kyle Monangai and just see where this goes. But I think also comparing this backfield versus Detroit, it's a little different in the sense that Caleb Williams brings way more to the table as a runner. And just inherently, I'm not saying he's Jane Daniels, I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson, but he's a really good athlete, especially compared to Jared Goff. No disrespect. But I do wonder what that element, and right, like we haven't seen Ben Johnson tap into that with his quarterback yet. And maybe he won't want to. Caleb Williams is a former number 1 overall pick after all. Why put more burden or more hits on his body? I understand that. But there is just more that comes open in offense when you have to worry about that rushing element from a quarterback. So, Monangai doesn't have great 40 speed, but he's got good acceleration. And if you're worried about Caleb Williams tucking and running himself on, what could be a read option, that may slow you down just a little bit as that backside defender instead of catching up to Monangai. So I'm really interested to see what all that looks like. But I did want to talk about some of these pass catchers, and you charted a lot of Luther Burden. He is a very dynamic player, and I love his yards after the catch. I also, in my opinion, I saw low 4.4 speed on the tape. I think this guy can get down the field. He'll primarily do it from the slot, and I wonder in a couple years' time, whenever DJ Moore's contract's up, what their process here. I could totally see a world where they're kind of preparing maybe Burden to eventually kind of step into what DJ Moore does for this offense. But what I wanted to talk about was Colston Loveland. Someone in our 32 Beat Writers Discord had asked you Loveland or Warren. And, I had kind of sat back and I wanted to see what you thought because draft-wise, I had Warren ahead of Loveland. Part of that's just like I think a little bit more just natural projectability, can play in line, yada, yada, yada. But they were very close on my big board. I think they were like 3 spots off. So very similar players. It just comes down to what you're looking for, 1A, 1B situation. But specifically for Ben Johnson, I think he's going to tap into using tempo to his advantage like we saw the Falcons do last year, like we talked about with the Jags earlier. And I think Colston Loveland's going to be the Swiss Army knife to make all that happen as my camera dies or my light dies. Because he can play in the slot, he could play out line, and he can play in line and be just fine. And you already have Cole Kmet. So really, I think they're going to use Loveland as this guy that when they go tempo, depending on what personnel you have on the field, they could either go 21, 2 tight ends and a running back, or 12 personnel, sorry. Or they could go 11 personnel and Loveland becomes the slot player, or he plays out wide. And basically, they're just going to find what you're doing and say, hey, what combats that the best possible way? And that's kind of where I'm starting to lean in your direction. I think Loveland's going to be on the field a ton. Not that Warren won't be, but I'm also buying into Loveland because I think year 2 of Caleb Williams, I feel a lot better about that versus Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, what's going on there. And, both spots have a fair amount of mouths to feed as is. So, yeah, Loveland. I think I'm with you. Fantasy-wise, Loveland over Warren here.
It's interesting when you look at Loveland, and I think we see like I still feel good about Loveland over Warren, just because also just the nature of the offense. And, Indy is just not looking like an a very efficient offense this year. That one that's going to be able to sustain drives. And Loveland too is like, hey, look what he did with Laporta year one in Detroit. And Laporta, I think Laporta ate so much. I think he finished second receiving yards behind Amon-Ra St. Brown that year, his rookie year. But also, I think it was because there was nobody behind. Jameson Williams really was still kind of a turbulent product. I think he was still having trouble off the field that year and still somewhat growing as a receiver. And we saw him finally grow into a role this year, and they used him how they truly wanted to use Jameson Williams this year, which pushed Laporta in the periphery. He was got him in the back of the receiving. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Odunze, and we know what Burden is. So yeah, it's really hard to project because, yes, I still like Loveland better than Warren, but it's really about who moves ahead. I think DJ Moore is probably going to be, the apex predator in that offense this year. But I do like Burden a lot because I think not only is a slot receiver, but this guy is really good out of motion in the backfield, right? Like if you get this guy on a wheel route out of the backfield, if you get him a lot of screen passes, he was very productive on his touches last year. I think 50% of his touches last year were manufactured touches, and he did really well with what he could out of him. But he is not. I think I've heard comps to him being of a Deebo Samuel type too. He's not that. He's not a Deebo Samuel kind of yards after contact guy. He's not very too physical of a receiver with screens and stuff like that. But he is a very dynamic guy, and I think we could see him in the deep, intermediate, and shallow all over the place. And it's just going to be really interesting to see how Ben Johnson goes forward with these guys. And I think we're not going to really have the true identity of the offense come week one or even the first month of September. Let's hope that they all this thing whole experiment in Chicago turns out really well, and they have a true identity in October that it reveals itself or starts to turn its head, because it's going to be really, really fun to watch this offense. And as far as Luther Burden goes, I have a bunch of Luther Burden as much as possible because I think he is kind of the future of this offense on as far as the pass catchers go.
And I think he's a great compliment long-term to Rome Odunze, right? You look at what Odunze did well at Washington and the best of Luther Burden in Missouri. I mean, those two, as your 1-2 punch moving forward, would be awesome. And then throw in Colston Loveland too. So if you're in a dynasty league and you don't have, Caleb Williams, maybe make some calls, start hitting up some of your league mates. That might be the play here. It sounds like he's got a good foundation for years to come. But man, Z, that was a blast. We covered a ton of ground. If anybody has any questions about this, leave a comment here on the YouTube video, reply back to this post on X. We're going to definitely monitor that. Make sure you get back. Or if you want to ask Z a question, you can ask me a question. Follow us on X. Our ats are down below in the description. Feel free to shoot us a DM. We're both pretty responsive. I don't want to speak too much for Z here, but we're both pretty responsive and happy to help out with any questions you may have. So that's kind of the joy of fantasy football. It's one big community. We're all football nerds trying to maximize our outcome here. So Z, man, had a blast talking to you today.
Same, man. Thank you. And it was good to do the show with you finally. And I'm looking forward to do more stuff with you as the season unfolds.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. One more time, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube. Follow us on X. Follow Z and I as well on X while you're there. Leave your comments down below. Until next time, we are signing off.